Hi everyone, and welcome to this week's special episode of Low Season Traveller Insider Guides. I hope you're all doing really well and the preparations are going well for the forthcoming festive season with you. This year we've recorded over 60 episodes of our podcast, and one of the most popular guests we've had on has been Carolyn Childs from MyTravel Research. Based out of Sydney, Carolyn has been a wonderful ambassador for doing tourism the right way for many years, as she works with many high-level organisations to help them to make decisions based on evidence-based research and insights. We recorded this episode today on the 21st of December 2022, and I wanted Carolyn's help to help us make sense of this year in the world of tourism. Let us know what you think in the comment section below, and enjoy. Hello, good morning.
Good evening. Good morning, Jed. You can see I've really got into the Christmas spirit.
You've been out and about, I take it.
Indeed, I have. I've actually just come in from. I was going to try and save the picture for you so that you could see where I've been. I've actually been sat on a rowing machine, but with a view of Iron Cove Harbour. And if I look a little red-faced, that's because it's about 30 degrees here. So.
Oh my gosh. Wow, fair play. Little bit cooler here. I'm getting used to speaking to people where it's really warm at Christmas. I was speaking to our good friends Rue and Warren in South Africa yesterday. They were just telling me how they just come in from swimming outside. And I was thinking, gosh, it's just a world away from what we've got here in Manchester in the UK, to be honest.
Do you have snow at the moment?
No, we had snow. We had actually quite a lot of snow. The motorway was blocked just where I lived about 3 weeks ago. But now it's just it's the standard grey rain kind of stuff that we always get at Christmas. We never get a white Christmas.
Well, interestingly, this year is a bit different because this year the weather has only been like this for about a week. We're in a La Nina in the southern hemisphere, so basically either side of the Pacific. So we've had lots and lots and lots of rain, and the temperature was well below average until about a week ago. So everyone has gone from, oh, will it ever stop raining, to, oh my God, it's so hot and humid. So
Can't win.
It's a classic Sydney Christmas. But when I look back to what the weather was like 2 years ago here, Jed, when we were dealing with catastrophic bushfires, and I should acknowledge that we do still have bad bushfires in Western Australia and bad grass fires in the north. But on the eastern side of the coast, we are definitely now, we have plenty of water. In fact, we actually have the opposite problem, which is some of our regional areas are now flooded. So we've gone to the other extreme on that. But if I look at, with the exception of those areas, if I look at what we were facing on the east coast of Australia 2 years ago, and, I can close my eyes and still see those images, as you probably saw them on the news as well, of places like Eden and Malakuta with that eerily coloured sky.
It was quite awful,
and
wasn't it?
It was, and we briefly had a stage where, a city that people come to from all over the world because it is a clean green city. We had a situation in Sydney where our air was briefly worse than that of New Delhi. Wow. So, so I think there are things very much in terms of what we're talking about today. There are things to be grateful for as well as things to still face as challenges.
Yeah, absolutely. I suppose just on that, how are things? We have to. Let's get the elephant out of the room first. Let's talk the COVID bit and get it out of the way, because it kind of dominates all conversations. But where are things up to at the moment for you guys with regards to COVID?
Well, we've, having been the hermit kingdom and had the borders closed for so long, we've reopened the borders. And the idea was that we would shift from a world of lockdowns. As you know, we just came out of a lockdown in late October in New South Wales. Melbourne was the most locked down city in the world over the last couple of years. We just came out of that. We'd had a lot of the restrictions eased back when the Omicron virus hit. So curiously, 3 months ago, we were in lockdown, or heading into lockdown, with 700 cases a day. Here in New South Wales, we had 2,300 cases a day. We don't actually report our national cases, which I find is quite interesting.
It is intriguing.
So we're having a lot of debate. I think the perception of the people at both state and national level is people have had enough, but I'm actually not sure that that's taken account of what's happening with the Omicron virus and what that means for people and how those behaviors are going to happen. So we're probably looking at across Australia about, I don't know, 5,000 or 6,000 cases a day. That probably sounds scandalously low to people in the UK at the moment, doesn't it?
that's
even allowing for a different,
that number of cases a day, that would be known as the COVID's over. You know, it's done.
But I think we did have different expectations around that, and now we're having those debates about policy and what it looks like and what mandates and vaccination elements are there. But I've been working with a research company called Glow, and we've been tracking some of that. And one of the things that we've seen is 58% of Australians, and that's held pretty steady, have said that they will actively avoid businesses that let unvaccinated people in.
Wow.
It's softened slightly. But what we saw was that kind of 58, 59 held solid. What happened was the proportion of people who went from I'm totally open, I don't care what you do, I think people should be free to do what they want, into the I don't know. It's kind of, that's where it's flip-flopped. The proportion of people who say I will avoid a business has held rock steady. Interestingly, among the people who say it doesn't bother them, a fairly large number of them live in either Queensland or Western Australia, where they have had their borders shut. They have had, for them, a crisis is that there are 5 COVID, well, in Queensland, they're in single digits of COVID cases, or were. I think, I haven't seen today's numbers. And in WA, their borders are actually closed until February. So it's very easy not to be worried about vaccinations when you've got no COVID. So then there are interesting dynamics about what's driving the rest of that. But the conversations that I've been having with the industry here, people keep saying to me, oh, but you know, we need every customer we can get. And it's, there is a novel of this name, but it's what I call all the light you cannot see problem, which is you see the customers who violently are angry if you won't let them in because they're not vaccinated. What you don't see is the customers who just never turn up because they don't trust you.
That's really interesting, Carolyn, because we've had similar conversations here recently. Obviously, we've got Omicron and it's just running rife because it is so infectious. You know, I mean, you know, you just can't stop it. So we're on about 90,000 cases a day. But it's that interesting, you know, it's exactly what you were saying. It's cases, you know, what's being reported is cases per day. Now, cases is where somebody has tested and tested positive. It's not infections. And that's a really, really key difference, because whilst 90,000 cases is, by the way, the most we've been ever having on a daily basis here in the UK, infections is likely to be way, way, way higher. Because you only get tested if, you know, you'd only be tested if you felt that you had some kind of symptoms. And if you've been double vaxxed or triple vaxxed, or if you've had, you know, COVID before, you're not necessarily going to get symptoms, and therefore you're not necessarily going to test.
Yes.
So it's kind of interesting, you know, the sort of the feeling is that the Omicron variant, you know, must be absolutely everywhere at this stage around the UK. And they're saying, you know, what I'm hearing is that, you know, it's going to be the dominant, if it's not already, it's going to be the dominant strain around the world in the next couple of weeks. And I suppose the hope is, and this is intriguing as well, because there's a lot of doom and gloom in our industry with regards to COVID. But with the nature of Omicron, it looks like this could be our way out of it, because pretty much everyone in the world is going to be exposed to this in the next few weeks. And that means that everyone is going to have some level of immunity as a result of this in the next couple of months at least. So maybe this is the beginning of the end. I mean, that's the optimist's view, isn't it?
Well, I'll be honest and say I think it's too early to tell, Jed, but I think that there is grounds for optimism in the sense of this is where a virus, if the statistics hold up, and we need to be careful about the patterns in South Africa, because South Africa has a very useful population. It has very different health and vaccination profiles. But if that holds up in countries with aging populations and cold weather in the UK, or different levels of immunity and very high levels of vaccination here in Australia, then we are seeing a shift from a pandemic to an endemic disease. I don't think any of us know that yet, but there is grounds to take the glass half full view of that, shall we say. It's just, how do we get through till the point where we know whether that's the case, and what decisions do we take if it isn't? And I think that that's again where I see this challenge of an assumption that policy stepping back means people will get on with their lives, because actually what we do potentially see is that what we're seeing certainly in Australia is the precautionary principle applying. For example, now this is rumor and I need to flag it as rumor, but part of the reason the mask mandate, which to me is the craziest thing not to ask people not to do, brutally honestly, because it's unpleasant, but it could just save your life or someone in your life you care about. It's not a major issue, but it's become totemic. Is that part of the reason is that it was seen, there was some research that said it deterred people from going to the shops. Well, here's the thing, highest levels of infection that you've seen anywhere in Australia tends to do the same thing. Yeah. But we can't control one of those things. So I think it's really interesting from that point of view that I think we're in for a period of a great uncertainty in the long term, in the short term, but we're building towards a future in the long to medium term. It's just how we can all find it within ourselves, within our businesses, within our cash flow to keep going through that, which, is going to be, we're into the third year of this. But you know what, it's not the bubonic plague. It doesn't have 80% mortality. We actually understand the mechanism by which it transmits, and we have vaccines. And the other thing, we tend to report the exceptions, but I just want to give a shout out. My person of the year is the people of the world who've gone out and got vaccinated, even many of them probably with great doubts. But they are really the quiet heroes of this, so we hear these stories of the people who are demonstrating that this is an imposition, but in Australia we're hovering around 90% of our adult population being vaccinated, and the 3/4 of our population being total population, including young people, being vaccinated. And when push comes to shove, Australians showed that they were willing to do that. And that 58% of people, when we asked them, why do you feel like that? It was around this sense of, we've all come together to do this for the community, and you are letting the team down. Yeah. And some of it's also personal things. If you know someone who is vulnerable, and in societies with aging populations, most of us do know somebody who's vulnerable. So I really do, where I was thinking when we said we were going to catch up about, who's really stood out this year. I think we all have. Well, all of us who have come together and done things and worked together and supported each other, we can do this as a group of people. It's a little bit like what we saw with COP26. Now, the final outcome was disappointing. But if you again take a glass half full view of that, we've started to put the mechanisms in place to do this, and we've started to unlock, we've started to create the policies that will allow the leaders to do the things that they will do to kickstart the innovations, the processes, the policies that will drive our battle against climate change, which is at least as existential a threat to us and far greater in the long run than COVID is. We've started to work on that, and we've created a framework where those leaders can do that work. We've started to think about what that will look like. And look, that could all go wrong, but if you look at some of the mechanisms that have come into place, if you look at how fast the price of renewables has dropped, for example, if you look at the fact that aircraft manufacturers are now trialing hydrogen fueled planes, and I think the first orders have gone in from that, I read this week. Yep. So, you know, again, when we put, I still think it would be great if we had more of the world having the policy settings right about that. But, you know, we're unlocking the potential, and many countries are creating the policy frameworks to do that and to prove to people that you can deliver this if you choose to do it.
With regards to sort of travel and the environment, you know, obviously there's been quite a few sort of initiatives. Travel declares a climate emergency is one of them, and we've signed up to that, and quite a lot have signed up to it. Two questions for you. One, are you quite optimistic about the way things are going for travel? And the second one is, we saw in about 2018, we started to see, I forget the Swedish expression for it, but, you know,
flight scam.
Yes, thank you, flight scam. Yeah. Do you think that we're going to see that again? Do you think with the increased talk about the environmental challenges, do you think we're going to start to see a little bit of resistance from people wanting to travel?
Well, I think in the short term, everyone is so busting to have a holiday that providing the borders stay down, the flights stay running, people will want to go back to that. But I think, like you, we've signed up to Travel Declares a Climate Emergency. Again, I think if we can demonstrate the business case for that, we're seeing more and more businesses moving in that direction. We're seeing, I mean, there's a risk with that we also start to see the greenwashing effect of that. I wouldn't say I'm either cautiously optimistic or not. I would say it depends which day of the week you talk about this. I mean, you see lots of signs of hope, but it's going to be a kind of 2 steps forward, 1 step back. And as long as it's 2 steps forward, 1 step back, that's probably still better than 1 step forward, 2 steps back on this. And, you know, so we've seen countries like New Zealand last year. So we know places like Tourism Bay of Plenty were one of the leaders in moving into the space of regenerative travel. But we've actually seen the New Zealand government starting to embody that into international tourism policy. Now, interestingly, and I think their research shows some of the same things that the research I've been showing here has, is, to me, it comes back to the thing that we've always known, which is if we want to get people to care about the environment, aside from a few leaders in that space, we actually have to start making that connection to community. Again, we did some, the company I did the research with on vaccinations, we looked at the whole issue of regenerative travel in partnership with the Tourism Collab, who teach a course on this, which I highly recommend to anyone. I did it. It will really help you start the journey. I still fall back into bad habits all the time, but it will start that journey. But really, we're starting to see those frameworks come in, but it really has to start with community. And I think that, you know, when I look at where people said this was, the number one thing that people in regional Australia said was important was that we actually need to stop strip mining communities and seeing them as a resource to be plundered. We really need to, you know, just kind of, you know, bring them on side and make it about that. And we're seeing when that works, that the environment is also possible to bring in as a partner around the table. So New Zealand is embodying in, they're creating measures around the environment and around community, and they're requiring people to embody that into their destination management plans. And that's where it happens. I mean, there's still the odd thing that makes you chuckle. So we know that this process is an incremental one built from the ground up, but then suddenly there's an announcement going, all these plans have got to be completed by X, which makes it kind of hard and stressful to do that. That's what I mean by that. We all revert back under a bit of pressure to the old ways of doing things. So we're seeing those kind of initiatives start to come in. We're seeing policy around the world start to align with that. And again, those leaders coming through. There's still not enough of that. I mean, I still have far too many conversations where you use the words community consultation and you can almost feel people's eyes rolling in their head. And the problem is, because that relationship can be so poisonous, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Because, you go out and do the community consultation and you get all the angry voices. But I think it's better, in that old analogy about having people in the tent pissing out, apologies for the language, everyone, it's much better to do it that way round. I mean, there's an example here of I'm not going to name the local government area, but a regional area was hosting a fairly major a road cycle event. And it was one of those things where, it's we've won this event for you. And then the community groundswell back against it was such that, despite the fact that half the planning was in place, the local council then voted to say, we're not going to accept it.
Wow.
Which for the tourism team in question was totally devastating. They'd been working with their state government, with their national government to bring this event, which brings jobs, it brings money. But because the idea was, well, these aren't our people, our roads are closed, our kids can't get to school, because no one had had that conversation, it falls over. And so you start to look at those things and you go, look, we've got to break that nexus. And I think some of that's also about how we reach out to communities, because often when you do the standard, let's have a town hall or whatever, you do get the loud voices there. And you do get the associations. There's a really interesting, you may have seen that I posted a piece from Harvard Business Review where they were talking about how to do resilience in this era. And that was one of the things they talked about, was recognizing how you bring the quiet voices into the room, the people who don't feel consulted but are ultimately persuadable, and how you recognize how to do that. And I think I'm hoping that 2022 is the year of the quiet people. As a fairly noisy person, I'm not sure that's good for me personally. But
are the quiet people a majority?
I think they are, yes.
Yeah. It's really hard, isn't it, to try and when they are naturally the quiet people, to try and make sure that they've got that voice and know that voice is important and will be heard. That's a real challenge.
Yes.
Well, who should be driving this? When we talk about the tourism, the business of tourism, is this tourism businesses that should be driving this? Is this, government tourism authorities, visitor convention bureaus that should be driving this? Is this all this form of tourism as well? This, this local tour, is this what the consumer wants as well? Because it's that sort of really hard part where in the past we've always been focused on the end consumer, as in, I mean, the visitor. And now, quite rightly, I think there's been more focus on the local communities and what they want. But at the same time, if we don't satisfy what the visitors want, then they won't visit as well. I suppose, to what degree are we doing research as well on what the visitors actually want? Are they saying that they want this form of tourism, that they want to be more integrated with the local community?
Well, one of the things is that we are hearing more and more and more people saying, look, they want, we've always had that thing, you want to come and live like a local and be a traveler, not a tourist. Now, honestly, I believe if you actually have to answer the question, I get into a lot of trouble saying you are a tourist, and I'm quite happy to own up to being a tourist, because I don't know that you can get to that point. But I think it's an uncomfortable thought that you're going somewhere where people active, how do people feel when they walk through Barcelona and a sign says tourists go home? And I mean, I'll be honest and say, look, I think people mean it in their hearts more than they show it in their behavior sometimes. We hear all the time that people want to do things that other people don't do, but we know that the same people go to the same Instagram spots over and over and over again, because we're social animals and we require that social proof. So I think we need to be modeling, we need to get the people who really do it properly to be modeling the right behaviors. But I think my answer to this is, I think anyone can start this journey. If we as businesses say that's what we want to do, and we should do, because I think one of the things that a lot of particularly regional areas and kind of near city center areas have found over this time, it was their locals that kept them alive when the doors went elsewhere.
Absolutely.
And again, I referred to New Zealand earlier, and I think we talked about this in a previous conversation, Jed, which was the idea that, when the borders in New Zealand shut, a lot of Kiwis said, it was kind of like having their country back. And it wasn't that they didn't welcome visitors, but that idea that you would walk a track. Well, firstly, you could get on a track to walk it, because, some of the most popular tracks were capacity constrained. So like the Milford track, the Routeburn track, the numbers are constrained on those routes. But secondly, when you walked it, you met other Kiwis. So you had that sense of walking in connection to country coming back. And I think that that's where you start to see that we need to recognize that, unless you're a specific experience, which I think is the area that's probably suffered the most, for a lot of businesses, it was their local communities who kept them going. And we need to respect and recognize that. We can help drive that if we start to think about our businesses. I mean, in anything, I always think the policy settings matter. I think those people who think government doesn't matter should go to places where there is no government and live there and see what it's like to live somewhere where there's no government. Try go living in Chechnya and see if it's fun having personal responsibility there. There's maybe a political point there, but, look at somewhere where there is poor or failed government, and you don't see a place where people live a good life on average. You see a place where a few people live a good life and not the rest do not. But I think the policy settings matter, but all of us can make a difference. And if we all started with what is it that I can do, then it's a bloody sight easier to me to demand that from other people. I mean, we've just had our strategy, our 2030 strategy discussion paper published here. And I mean, I think, I sat on the board of a regional tourism association here, and we submitted and said, look, it's not that what's in there is wrong, but it's just there's not enough targets, there's not enough ambition. And, for all the talk about we need to involve the community, there are no proposed metrics for that. The proposed metrics are all how do we get back to 2019? So I think we've all got to, it can start with all of us. And that sounds trite, but honestly, if we can't change it ourselves, if we can't try and change it, then how can we ask other people to change it? And years ago, I remember doing some work over in Western Australia, and they actually had Charles Landry, who's an international placemaker, as their thinker in residence. And he made an interesting observation, which was partly what I also saw during my focus groups, which was there was a kind of policy perception that people there like to say no. So you couldn't do anything. And senior policy, and he actually did an audit of how many signs in Perth tell you can't do things, as opposed to how many tell you can. I tell you what, it's a useful audit to do in your own town, folks, people listening into this, and your own self, is go and look at how many signs tell you what you can't do versus tell you what you can do. And he said, but senior policymakers would say to him, oh, we can't change this. And he's like, but you're senior policymakers, how can you change this? And up to a point, you can see that they can. And one of the places I think things are not so good there at the moment, but I always remember going to visit Medellin in Colombia, which of course everyone's first association, or almost everyone's first association with Medellin, is Narcos. My first association with Medellin was a city of hope. Because when I went there, it's not the most beautiful city. It was kind of Birmingham before the redevelopment.
Right.
But it's beautifully located, it's surrounded by mountains. But, you know, they made a decision that they were going to turn things around. And the first thing they did was they put their metro in. Just like you did with Manchester when you brought the trams back. And that changes the civic conversation. And it's finding those points where you say, how do we change the civic conversation? And, you know, I went to many more beautiful places in Colombia, but I don't think I went to any that had the heart and spirit of Medellin, and that sense that people were trying to turn around a past. Now, there still were many challenges. We know that COVID, we know the pressures on the border with Venezuela have changed a lot of that, but I really saw a city where people were trying to change the dialogue. You know, they put in a cable car to a national park, but they created jobs and public transport into some pretty tough areas. And they built a library in some of the toughest and most affected areas. So you see that those ways of saying that policy settings and that creation of placemaking in that very conscious sense of how do we make ordinary people's lives better in a very practical way can turn around a situation where, you know, the murder capital of the world was somewhere where I felt safe to walk the streets at night. That's incredible. Maybe not on my own, but certainly with Andy, my partner. And we're able to walk through some very tough and rundown neighborhoods without it feeling like we were literally taking our lives in our hands. So I think all of us can do it. And I think one of the things that maybe the last couple of years have robbed us of that mental space and energy to think about that. And I would include myself in that. And I think all of us could probably reflect on that as the way that we've kind of taken that and destroyed that mental energy from that coming out. That feeling of hopelessness and helplessness becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. And, you know, I must admit, I have suffered from that myself this year. And I think you also commented that so have you felt that at times, Jed. But, you know, is it better to have tried and failed, or is it better, you know, to have tried and failed, or not to have tried and failed? Because you'll never know. There's only one variable you can change in that, and that's your own bit. That's
true. It's the I mean, when you talk about the sort of that mental challenge, it's kind of like I say, we've had so much to think about over the past 2 years, and like I say, you know, like I said, the whole journey from a personal point of view, you know, it's just been so hard. But sometimes it's that sort of challenge of, you know, I've sort of said it so many times to different people. I've never worked as hard in my life. I wake up at 4 a.m. I've got more ideas, more things that I want to do. I've never been busier, and yet got nothing for it. And there is that sometimes where I do think, Carolyn, just that point that you make, I suppose, which is, you know, actually I could have done nothing in the past 2 years, and certainly financially I'd be in no worse off position, actually, in the slightest. And then you sort of think, well, what's it all for? I mean, are you just busying yourself for what? And but of course, you know, there is a greater or a higher goal that you have for all of this, but it is all consuming. And that's what sometimes I worry about, is from a personal point of view, I'm thinking about stuff all the time to do with Low Season Traveller, to do with how we can do travel better and fairer and everything else. And then you're worried about the COVID stuff that's going on as well. And then you just think, you know, what am I not thinking about that I should be thinking about? What am I being almost distracted from? And that's, it's mental acrobatics. So, and that's where sometimes I think, you know, like many people, I feel at times burned out. I mean, I'm ready for the Christmas break. I've got to say, I am ready for a couple of days off just to, switch off from things and just start thinking about other stuff. and who knows what I'll think about. God only knows. I don't know.
but I think we actually do. It's important that we acknowledge that, and I think we're getting better at that. But I think we need to keep working on that idea that it's okay to say you're not okay. So we have the "Are You Okay?" campaign here. I think we've got to get better at that, and I've been trying. I mean, not consistently, but trying to model that behavior myself now. But it's terrifying, because will clients stop giving me work if they know that I've struggled?
That vulnerability thing, you feel vulnerable by opening up on that, and that's always going to be scary, isn't it?
Well, I think it has been scary. Has it cost me work? Very possibly. But then I think afterwards, Jed, what were those people buying? You know, were they buying Superwoman, or because Superwoman? No one is Superwoman. And then I look at it and think, well, you know, there are clients who've stuck with me, and you know, there are days where I'm going, look, it's going to have to come on Monday rather than on Friday, because I just need to get away from my desk. But I think, you know, I've had really loyal clients stick with me. I've done interesting projects. You know, we've helped a lot of people. I probably, if I look at it, the membership site's been what suffered, because, you know, that's a constant, that's a hamster wheel to keep people going on that. Whereas, you know, the consultancy work comes in, you do it. And that's, so it's the hunting's gone better than the farming, I think, being brutally honest about it. And that's what I think 2022 is the year I go back and give, you know, the stuff that gives the steady revenue a bit of a do. But, you know, having conversations with people about interesting ideas, developing products and services that we think, you know, the only slight problem is I need to get down and I have a buddy, we want to develop some training courses together, but we would actually like to sit in the same city and develop them rather than
that would be nice, wouldn't it?
It would be nice. But, you know, so I actually haven't left New South Wales, the state I live in. I haven't left it for a year.
Wow.
Which, when I think I was that person who was, you know, on flights, international flights.
It's an adjustment.
You know, it is an adjustment, but you know, there's compensations to that too. I mean, and actually, I have to say, obviously, if you're going to be locked down, Sydney, it's not a bad place to be locked down.
Yeah, well, that's true. There's worse places you could have been. There's worse places for sure.
There are worse places to be, and you know, I bought myself a foldable kayak. I kayaked during lockdown. So, but I think that vulnerability, I hope we do. Probably my biggest fear for 2022 is that focus on the idea of back to normal. Yeah. Because I don't think I don't think we can go back, and B, I don't think we should. I don't know what what you're doing with Low Season Traveller, you're trying to drive an idea of changing behavior and that model. So what are your thoughts on that, Jeff?
Yeah, I mean, I think I just think that we have a responsibility to, like you say, I think we have a responsibility to do travel better. And to be fair, you know, you know what we were talking before about the making sure that local communities benefit from it. I kind of recognize that, and it's interesting. So for me, like I said, all of this, God, life, I suppose, it is just a journey or a ride, depending on how you look at it. But this particular part of the journey with Low Season Traveller, I kind of came to, because I don't think we've spoken about this since actually we made this move, but I always said at the very outset, you know, Low Season Traveller, we're not going to be a tour operator, we're not going to be a travel agent. Been there, done that. We're going to be the place to inspire and educate people about low seasons and everything else. And then it was put to me by a DMC partner in Nepal, of all places, at World Travel Market. See, again, this is, you know, sometimes it's those what's the word?
Serendipitous.
Yes, exactly. Circumstances on a face-to-face event, not a planned meeting, all of that, and it was at World Travel Market. And this guy said to me, he said, look, you know, you're trying to do something really, really great here. You know, you should really, truly lead from the front on this, and you should organize tours. It could just be small group tours, go somewhere different every month, just with a group of, say, 8 to 10 people during the low season. and have every element of that tour as being something which is truly locally, culturally immersive, that gives back to the local community in some way, shape or form, and sort of, demonstrate, be the living embodiment of what travel done better and fairer is. So, long story short, I've been for the past few weeks working on a number of itineraries, which we're hoping to run in 2022, if of course the COVID gods allow us. But that's where, where I'm at now is actually, yeah, I need to sort of, is it walk the talk or talk the walk? I forget which way around it is, but I actually sort of deliver on this and actually lead from the front on it, rather than sort of say, oh, we're only going to work with tour operators who are super sustainable and friendly. Well, actually, if we believe, and I think we do, that we know how it should be done right, and we've got the right kind of partners that can help and guide us on that journey, and we won't get it perfect, but we'll have a pretty good go, then we should lead from the front and show people how it's done. So yeah, I think I'm quite kind of optimistic about the future. Nervous as hell. I mean, I never wanted to be a tour operator. I must have said it to you in the past as well. I didn't want to go back to tour operating.
I think the word shoot me if I ever were in there.
Exactly. I mean, especially, and then you start thinking it through, Carolyn, and you think, right, so let me get this straight. You're setting up a tour operator from scratch in the current climate. Like, what are you thinking about? What are you actually thinking about? But it feels right, because I think it sounds very grandiose, and I don't want to sound like an asshole about it, but the world needs it. We need to do this stuff better, and therefore I don't want to be one who's just talking about what others should be doing and everything else. I want to actually say, well, you know what, we're actually doing it, and absolutely unashamedly, we won't get it right. First off, I know we won't, because it's like anything else. It's a journey. There's no end destination. There's just increments of trying to get it better and trying to get it closer to what's right by everybody. But I don't think you'll ever get to a stage where it's like, okay, we've done it, it's perfect, that's it, sit back. No, it's constantly going to be evolving.
But I think it's interesting, because while you were saying that, there's perhaps a company that you may want to talk to in Zurich who's been on the same journey and done the same crazy thing, with the great name Detours.
And that name, by the way, that is a cracking name, isn't it?
She did the Regenerative Tourism course that I was talking about earlier, Jed, and she's creating social impact tours of Zurich. And reminding people, because we know that Zurich has that very prosperous top layer, but she's taking people and showing them another side of Zurich. And she's launched at the moment too. So she took the course and used it as her framework to develop the concept. And love that. And so, you're not the only one doing this, which I don't know if that kind of is, oh my God, I thought we cornered this market, but I think you're the kind of person, Jed, that would go, look, this is validating the idea that, we can't wait till this stops. No. And what that looks like. So hers are basically, I think they're walking day tours.
Yep.
And I look at that and think, well, this is, and it's really built around the idea of regenerative tourism, so that it's, it's a more holistic view of the city, it's a more authentic view, that it will make a difference to people. And some of the money is contributing back into some of, like, they'll actually go and visit, certain social impact projects. Some of the money from the tours will flow back into that. So I think, what I've been saying, it's the old Charles Dickens thing, isn't it? It's the worst of times, but it's the best of times, because now is that time to say, look, we can't wait any longer. And honestly, when we look at the science, we can't wait to change the model. You have to do that, and then it becomes how you get through that stage in the interim and what that looks like. And we've seen lots of great, last year I spent a lot of time talking about some of the businesses that have pivoted. Now, some of those haven't stayed in quite the same frameworks, but there's the framework of interesting things that come out of this. So I think they've scaled it back a little bit, but at the height of the of the pandemic, when the world was really shut down in Australia, a group of people were set up called Agents of Influence. And it took travel agents who'd been furloughed or whatever, but who were really great at industry knowledge. Often they were younger, but not necessarily always younger, but had also done, were good at shooting video. They upgraded their skills a little bit, and then they were positioning them to DMOs, a little bit like yourself in a sense, Jed, with Low Season Traveler, where they would do the kind of social influence piece. But because they were travel agents, they could then carry it all the way through into booking and conversion. But starting with the inspiration as the permission to do that.
Yeah.
And, so I think that this is that time to create new models when people are kind of like, what will that look like? We know small group is going to be easier and lower risk for a while. So there's the risk in doing it at all. But oh my God, imagine if you were, one of the big tour companies. I won't name any, but imagine the pressure on you if you were one of the big tour companies. You've got dozens of assets, you've got buses, you've got staff, you've got all of that. Doing it at this kind of small scale, and that may never be a better time to do proof of concept and have all those moments where you get it wrong, because you're going to have, there'll be the odd angry person who's bringing their stress from this to that, but that's life. I think there's going to be a time where people are kind of understand that things do go wrong a bit.
It's that thing as well, isn't it, Carolyn, where, and I think you're spot on there, it probably is the best time to try new stuff, because you have, I'm not saying you've got a ready-made excuse, but given the climate that we're in, people might be more understanding of the fact that it's not necessarily going to be perfect, especially if you're trying something different. Therefore, the opportunity to try and fail has probably never been better, because if you fail in the current climate, no one's really gonna, they're not really going to have a go at you too much, because at least you tried, especially if you're trying to do something relatively noble or with a noble element to it. At least you tried.
Well, and I'd say on that, Jed, what are your options for getting feedback as you're going on? Because actually all you're really talking about in a sense with this is remembering back to your airline days of the day when you did the soft launch on something. Yeah. I mean, in effect, what we're talking about is a soft launch.
Yeah, effectively. So what we're talking about is our plans for 2022, like I say, COVID gods allowing, is we'll do one tour. Literally one date so one tour literally of between 8 and 10 people each month of the year, probably starting in about March, April time. It might need to get sort of pushed further to the back half of the year. But the idea is that that on each one of the first tours, I'll actually go out as well and video document the whole experience, so that we'll create, so we'll have live testimonials as we go. So we'll sort of, again, be understanding what it's like from both the traveler's perspective, but also then the local perspective as well, because we want to interview the locals as well, so that we can understand, what they think about the whole kind of program. But the idea is to document every element of those tours. And there's a couple of reasons that. One is that the point that you made, which is about getting the feedback and understanding and learning from it on both sides of the fence. And the other side of it, of course, is you've then got that live demo, which we haven't sort of had for any of the low season stuff, which is we can show people this is low season in Tobago. This is the reality. You can actually see that at the point when you're booking it, whereas usually you don't get to see what that experience is like. So it provides you with the marketing then for future years when you then do want to expand if you feel you've got it right. So yeah, very much a sort of a soft launch, but that's why it's important this year to get it as right as we can, because you want to try and create the template for what's to come in the future.
But I think the other thing that the way that doing this does, Jed, is it de-risks low season travel for a lot of people, because one of the reasons we apart from things like the weather, which is always a concern, is what's going to be open.
Yeah.
I mean, who knows with COVID, but you've got a reasonable chance of And this is ironic for somebody who went to a Catholic school, going to Poland and sitting there going, oh yeah, well, we probably won't be going to that museum because it's All Souls Day, because as you know, we are low season travelers. And then it's going, oh, but the Jewish museum will be open because it's not, it might be a public holiday for everyone, but it's a Catholic holiday. So, so I think it's that also that idea of de-risking low season travel, which is, people then don't necessarily have to come back to you to do low season travel once they've got the idea of what it's for, but that idea of, okay, we know those things are going to be open.
It's that you're right though. It's the educational piece. I mean, and that's what we're trying to do on the website as well at the moment, and through the podcast, to be fair as well, is helping people to understand what the reality is like. And like I say, you sort of say de-risk it, which is probably a better expression for it. I've always sort of said it's about taking the fear away. Take the fear away. Don't be scared that it's the low season. It's okay. The experience actually is wonderful, but we need to show people that experience. And I think in the past, the mistake that's been made with regards to extending seasonality is it's just been, the market's been trashed. People have just been told, look, go because it's cheap. And that's for me, that's the last reason that you want to go. That's a nice little bonus. Don't go because it's cheap. Go because it's a wonderful experience and it's a completely unique experience. And you're spreading economic benefit at a time when, arguably the community needs it. The fact that you're saving 50% on it, that's just a happy kind of bonus. But that's the kind of the challenge really. But like I say, it's about educating and inspiring. And I think we can do that probably better by, if COVID allows us, by going to these places with travel.
So March, April, where is the first cab off the rank, Jed? Is it Tobago? If you
No, it's
Tobago.
not. It's where else but Ireland. Ireland is the first one that we're looking at running.
Okay.
Yeah. Because, and again, it makes sense because it's nearer. We've got the common travel area between the UK and Ireland, and we've got a partner out there that is really, really cool. So for that one, just to give you one example of the kind of stuff that we're doing, is most tours that take in Ireland and Dublin in particular, they take in the Jameson distillery and the Guinness brewery, which I'm absolutely, I'm not knocking it, but I'm just not for that. So what I was saying to our partners over there is I said, look, what I want us to do is to bring the group to a pub in the north side of Dublin. That's not a touristy pub, very much a locals only pub actually, but a traditional Irish pub. And we're going to have the landlord there who's super amenable to this, who's going to talk through the importance of pubs in the community in Ireland over the years and how people used to buy their groceries from the pubs in Ireland years ago, as well as everything else. Going to talk through all the different drinks, let people pour their own pint of Guinness after the landlord has told them how they should be pouring it. And then they can sit down and enjoy their pint of Guinness in a local pub with the local people, and have some local music as well, which we'll talk through. That to me, that's an authentic, real experience. It's providing an economic lift to a pub which probably has suffered pretty badly for the past 2 years. Rather than money going to the Guinness brewery, which gets millions of tourists every year, and financially they're actually okay. So that's the kind of thing where it feels like it's delivering a little bit more. It'll be great crack for the locals of that pub actually to meet different people as well. So that's the kind of sort of feel that we're trying for on all of this kind of stuff. Building Anglo-Irish relations, maybe. It could be a disaster.
Well, yeah.
Now I'm thinking it through.
Well, no, I mean, I think, one thing, as you said, it's nice and close. If it's a disaster, you can stick everyone on the ferry or on the flight back.
Absolutely.
But yeah, it's interesting I know from the work that I've done here, that's what people, when they think about Ireland, it is that sitting in a pub yarning with the locals is what people say that they want. And I guess, how many people are doing the tour, Jed?
That'll be 10.
10 people, and that includes you, or
10 plus me.
10 plus you. Okay. Yeah. So so you've got a bit of a population in the UK to aim for. What is the population at the moment? 70 million?
Yeah, about 70, just under. Yeah.
So it's kind of like it's kind of a small sales target. It'll be fine.
That's what I mean. We should be able to fill it, and that's the thing. Again, it's like you were saying before. It's about sort of relatively doing it low risk, but
Mm.
we can then develop those. Hopefully, we'll get some brilliant testimonials from that. We'll film the whole thing, and then that showcases then to people, right? This is what low season traveling with Low Season Traveler is all about. This is what it looks like. This is the reality. And if you're scared that the weather's going to put you off, I mean, there's no more risky place weather-wise than Ireland in the low season months. Although I would say it's the same risk in Ireland in the summer, to be fair.
To be quite honest, I think if you look at the UK and Ireland, basically the risk. Well, at the moment, while you still have the Gulf Stream, that risk is there on any single day. I mean, and I've had that conversation with people here because, as I said, we've had a La Nina year. And I'm kind of like, look, you don't stop yourself. If you come from the UK, you don't stop doing things because the weather's bad. And I think, and it's also about remembering what people's expectations are. So I went to Uluru, which everyone in the world should do, by the way, because it is an amazing place. And it was a year it rained. So we went just after they'd actually been cut off for a month, for about 3 weeks, because it had flooded. But we were there and it rained. And this is where that moment, there were a group of tourists who were like, it's not sunny. We had a full-on rainbow across the top of Uluru. For those people who don't know its true name, you may know as Ayers Rock, a full rainbow across the top. And our guide, who was at that point where guides are totally burnt out because they've said the same things 100 times, even our guide was stood there going, oh my God, you could come here every day for 20 years and not see that. But people were still complaining because it wasn't sunny. And I've got vivid memories of walking around Ayers Rock Resort, which is called Ayers Rock Resort, and seeing mushrooms pop out of the desert sand.
Wow.
And it's kind of like, well, there's stuff that you'll see that you will not see at other times if you go then. And, similarly, going to places like Krakow and in November, which, well, firstly, you can actually get into places and people are delighted to see you, as you said. You get to hang out in all the kind of cool and funky local places without people tutting at you. So for me, as you know, we are low season travelers. I've always been a bit puzzled by the idea. Interestingly, my main holiday quite often is in the main season, but short breaks for me is when you do that. I mean, we used to be winter walkers in the Lake District in England, which is definitely a sport for optimists.
It's fabulous. Do you know, we were just talking about this the other day, myself and my wife. We were saying, so we live, not the Lake District, but we're in the sort of the Pennines area. And it was one of those days where it was a lovely clear sky. And it was in the evening, and there was fog over parts of the lowlands of the sort of the foothills of the Pennines. God, it just looked absolutely out of this world. And we were just sort of saying, again, sometimes those winter skies, they're kind of, there's like an almost a pinkish glow to them. The winter skies in the UK are just absolutely fabulous. And you don't get those same skies in the summer. You really don't. It's a different, I don't know if it's a different hue or what it is, but you tend to only get it in the winter.
Or the other one that I think you talked about, March in Ireland, that really sharp blueness actually is one of the things that I miss. The other thing that I think you miss if you don't travel at that time of year is that moment where you think it's going to be bare trees forever and then suddenly everything is green. Which I think is, I think that those pivotal moments that if you always come in summer, you simply won't get those moments. Occasionally it falls apart. Like a couple of years ago, I was hoping to go up and walk in the Dolomites in about 2 weeks before the main season starts, but nothing's open. The local buses that will take you to, the day walks that you can do. So that's where that tension is. Can you get enough open to make that experience work?
It's true. But it's that classic chicken and egg, isn't it? The local businesses would say, look, hey, if there was enough people coming, we'd open up. And then, you know, it gets tied in with stuff like airlift as well. You know, if you're an island destination, and there's a myriad of sort of factors. But that's where I think, you know, you've got to start somewhere. You know, we've got to start somewhere. So.
Well, but I think the other thing on that is that's where working as a group or as a destination comes together. So this is something that is a constant bugbear of mine in, I can't remember if it's the same in UK, but the idea that you can eat somewhere decent in a regional area in Australia on a Monday night is, everything is shut. Even destinations, and I'm not going to name some, but I remember a friend of mine who worked for a tourism organization, and she was doing a regional tour of the area it was in her responsibility. She picked a town that was known as a foodie town on the basis that was her best chance of having somewhere decent to eat on a Monday night. No, everything's closed.
Nothing.
Apart from, you know, fast food, maybe one pub, and even the one pub kind of stopped serving at 7:30.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of like, guys, here's the thing, there probably are enough people, if, you know, most of these small towns now in Australia, we've got some great, you know, interesting, unusual restaurant experiences. Like, seriously, could you be open one Monday each? You know, get 4 or 5 of you together. And you know, we're not open tonight, but everyone's so terrified, or if they do that, then they'll come back, they'll go to them. And I'm like, yeah, but more people will come. You know, if more people know that there's a Monday evening experience, because we like to stay on a Sunday night and a Monday night. Again, that not having the, you know, almost having the place to yourself. Yeah. But, you know, you've really got to plan where you're going to eat and know what you're going to eat. And quite often, if we've got, you know, a cottage rather than staying in a hotel, that will be the evening we eat in, because, you know, trying to find someone. Yeah. Or particularly, you know, being, as you know, I was born in England, I live in Australia, but meal wise, I'm a South American. You know, I don't like to eat my dinner that early in the evening. And it's kind of like, look, can we think about, that's where that experience for the visitor is, but that would also keep a steady range of jobs, because we know globally that that workforce skills, we've got a workforce shortage. And it's kind of like, it's actually not, but we had it before, Jed. Like, people don't want to pursue careers in tourism because we don't actually offer them careers. We offer them jobs that are highly insecure, not that well paid relative to what they're being asked to do, and that don't actually have that much of a career. We don't demonstrate the career path through.
I think we're getting exposed as a whole. I think we're getting exposed for that massively now through COVID. I think there's, I mean, I'm sure it's the same in Australia. It's certainly the same in Europe. It's absolutely, it's a HR nightmare at the moment, because so many people have left the sector, and you know, it's really, really hard out there to get anybody to fill any of these roles. But like you say, they're offered jobs, they're not offered careers, and that's something that, again, that's another challenge for, you know, the whole travel industry, that needs to be overcome. Big problem.
Well, interesting. I had a conversation with, so I'm a regional tourism ambassador through the association that I'm connected with, and I interviewed somebody there who's created what she said she's helped people create an employer brand. Mm-hmm. And Go-To-Travel, we're hoping to do a webinar with them. I'll let you know, because it might be that your listeners will be interested. Talking to a little property called the Inaminka Hotel.
Inaminka Hotel.
Yes, I'll share you a link so you can take a look at this place. Because believe me, if you wanted to think about a place that should have a resourcing nightmare, the Inaminka Hotel ought to be it. It's in a very remote part of, it's really outback Australia. Yeah, it's a pub. There are lots of social issues in the area where it's set. They have loyal staff. They are able to keep their staff. They were able to survive where we had our international borders closed. You see, normally if you travel to those areas, the people you will find working behind a bar in a typical town like that will be British backpackers. Yep. In fact, I have a very vivid memory of going to Roma in Queensland for a conference and going to the pub afterwards. And the entire staff had accents very similar to yours.
Really?
They were all young. Well, interesting, they were all young girls who were backpacking around Australia. And they're quite deliberately chosen because a lot of them have had hospitality experience in the UK. Roma is not really a tourist town. It's a mining town. It's in the center of the big gas and all the natural gas fields out there. So the people who are coming into town from that are predominantly guys who, and they're coming into town. They haven't seen anyone for weeks. So you've got to have someone who is going to be able to cope with what happens when people who've worked in mining camps for a few weeks come into town and get into a pub. And they were brilliant at it. And that's normally who you're getting. But similarly, I remember going to Tennant Creek in Central Australia, and the motel was managed by a British couple who were doing it for 6 months, and then they were looking for their next British couple. But the Indominka Hotel has created local staff jobs by actually completely rethinking how they've done things with Ali Uren, who created this employer brand idea. And really getting them to say, well, look, what do you want? What is it that you are hoping to achieve from doing this? And I'm really looking forward to the idea that we can get them chatting about, the journey that they had to go on to an employer, to rethinking about what is the value proposition that they're offering people as an employer. And, how could they do it? Because, we had, I remember back in 2015, we have quite generous rates for hospitality workers relative to international standards in Australia. But at the height of the resources boom here, basically you couldn't get anyone to work in hospitality then. And we had penalty rates. So you actually get double time if you work on a Sunday or on a public holiday. And people say, oh, we need to get rid of penalty rates. And I'm like, look, I don't want to be rude, but we had 70,000 vacancies in tourism and hospitality. And I'm like, if we've got 70,000 vacancies while we're paying people to work antisocial hours, we ain't going to fill 70,000 vacancies if we take away the one thing that might tempt people to do it. But now I think, well, maybe that wasn't it. Maybe it was the idea that you could rely on your hours. And again, this is a slightly controversial point, but when we had our job support packages come in, I heard a lot from the industry about, people's support packages are too generous. They don't want to take the jobs. But again, that was very much from our perspective as an industry. Without looking at it, it's like, why should anyone take a job where they can't pay their rent and feed their kids?
Well, yeah.
What I wouldn't take that job. You wouldn't take that job. We're lucky at having other choices, but and we've also seen it run up against other problems. That we have a housing boom in Australia. It's absolutely crazy what houses cost in Sydney at the moment.
I believe so. I was speaking to our friend Chris recently, and he's
a mutual friend of ours, Chris. Yeah, Chris Flynn has just sold his house around the corner from me, and when he told me what he's paying, 2 years ago, my house, which is a 3-bedroom house with much bigger foot space, was worth about what Chris has just been paid for his 2-bedroom cottage. It's just obscene. But that's the other problem that we've seen is, there was this idea that we would pull people out into from the cities to work in these regions and take these jobs. Yeah. And people have been tempted by the jobs, but there's nowhere for them to live. So I think that's the other big criticism I've had of the strategy here is the strategy is an entirely internally focused one. We aren't looking at the determining factors that sit around it, like where do hospitality workers live? The go-to case on that, again, Chris Flynn our mutual friend Chris Flynn talks about this one, which is Queenstown. You were busing people in to work in the town from an hour and a half away because, all the accommodation was accommodating tourists. But you've got to have someone to wait the tables, operate the lifts, run the buses out to the ski run areas. So, the system there is broken. And I think that's something that we do really need to start thinking about is what do we do to unbreak the system?
Yeah, I'd love to let me know when that webinar is
Yes.
Carolyn, because I'd love to join in and learn a bit more about that, because it sounds like their experience could be beneficial for an awful lot
it
more.
will be Ali who helped them create it, and the hotel talking themselves, so it won't be me, much as I would love to talk to them. It's, you know, it's Ali's genius that's kind of, and that the hotel's openness to changing. But I'll send you a link, so when you post this, you can post the link to you know, the Inaminka Hotel, because it really is, it's again, it's one of those great authentic Aussie experiences, but it's now an experience that's working for the people who work there as well. And it's creating those sustainable jobs, and, you know, a little business that's really being a leader, that's taken that decision to change that we were talking about earlier. I think, you know, just a great job that they've done by willing, and I think that's one of the things I do see in tourism. We tend to think everyone else should change. We don't tend to be very willing to change ourselves. It's kind of like, well, you know, again, it comes back to that. If we're not prepared to change, how can we ask other people to change? And how can we get people to, you know, I mean, I'll give you an example. I don't want to bang on about the policy too much. Actually, I do, but you'd never get anything else done today. But the entire section on workforce, not once in that entire section of the strategy does it actually acknowledge that our workforce is made up of people. The language is all about resource, workforce. It talks about why people don't want a job. I'm like, we've got abundant evidence about people, why people don't. What is our plan to change how we look at this, and how we think about it, and how we recognize that we want to do that? We actually do have some great stories to tell. You know, I can't remember what proportion of Fortune 100 CEOs actually began their career in tourism or hospitality as a casual job. So even the casual jobs have great life skills if we recognize that's what they are. And even if we say, look, there are short-term jobs, and here are the benefits of those, say when you're a student or whatever, that you can accommodate them alongside, we need to reposition every aspect of our supply chain on this. But to me, it comes back to, we need to recognize that we're dealing with human beings.
It's kind of telling, isn't it, that, you know, over recent years, you know, it always used to be, I'm sure you'll remember these days as I do, the department used to be personnel. And then it changed to human resources, and that kind of tells you exactly, it's indicative of how organizations saw people more as resources, and stripping away the people element, and I think that's probably something which, you know, has to change. You know, we have to get back to, you know, we are in the people business, especially in tourism, for God's sakes. You know, it's very much a people business. On your point about many of the leaders, you know, and where they started out, it's always intriguing when you see the UK travel industry leaders, the outbound guys anyway, that I know, all of the CEOs, pretty much without exception, they all were either reps, or they certainly backpacked their way around the world. They certainly had bar jobs and restaurant jobs on their way around the world, but all of them had those kind of jobs, and they were all, you know, they're all, you know, CEOs and owners of businesses now. So I think that there definitely is skills there. It's about, like you say, it's probably a little bit more about how we tell that story, and about how we communicate the value of those kind of roles as well. A lot of it's about communication, actually.
Well, I think we don't sell the value of them, but we then also do need to demonstrate to people about how they move through that, and skilling them up. And I think one of the things that I do see is a huge unwillingness to train people. And I think that is the difference from the old days, was that there was a training culture. Whereas now there's this idea, we've got this problem of the free rider effect, which is the idea that if I train these people, they'll leave to go somewhere else. Now,
only if they're not happy.
Well, they're not only if they're not happy, but also the problem with that is if we were all training people, it wouldn't matter, because it would kind of go round the cycle that you would have that. So if everybody was training people, we would split that. But I remember years ago going to a talk by somebody who'd been the CEO of a video chain here called Video Easy. And he was the guy who didn't do what Blockbuster did. He sold the business just before video stores and DVD stores, ceased to be an exciting business model. So he saw the writing on the wall on that. But he used to say one of their biggest line items was staff training. Bearing in mind, again, video stores, for those people who are old enough to remember them, were largely staffed by casual staff as well, because you needed people who were willing to sit in a store on a Saturday night while people walked around and looked at DVDs. So for anyone under 35, that's what we're talking about. But he said, people would say that to him and say, why do you spend so much money when most of your staff leave? And he said, I'm not worried about the ones who leave, I'm worried about the ones who stay.
Absolutely. What if they stay and you haven't provided them with any training?
And I recently did some work here with a client in the luxury space, and we ran a live panel of some luxury travel buyers. And one of the things they talked about was, we know that Australia has a problem with service style. But again, to me, that's because we've never adequately expressed what we feel our service style is and manage customer expectations around that. If you're going to look at it compared to that very formal, the European model or the very deferential Asian model, we're never going to win that race. But to me, what I think we need to be training people to do, and I think Britain a little bit, we're going to have a peer-to-peer interaction, because that's who I say we as Australians, because I am now an Australian. Except for the cricket, and we won't talk about that.
Don't go into that. I bet you wish you were Australian.
No, you can't change your cricket team. I always think of that Argentinian quote about football, which is, you can change your sexuality before you can change your cricket team. You can change your religion before you can change your cricket team. They talk about football, but it's true for cricket. But the idea of that if we can do that service, and when you see it when it's done well, it's a very proactive service model. So it's an anticipatory service model. It's not a deferential one, but I want you to have a great experience. The downside of where it doesn't work in Australia is when we all need to be having a great experience. And I've had that service style where, in one particular resort, I'll try not to name it, but it's a very popular resort area in Australia. I remember sitting in a restaurant at Easter, waiting for over an hour for somebody to take my order, and being told by the staff, when I started to get tetchy, you just need to relax a bit. I'm like, yes, I do. But that's because you're too relaxed. You're not looking at this from, and I had my mother, who was at that time in her 70s with me. She needs to eat at specific times. At that time, we didn't know she was a diabetic. And now I just would have said, this woman's about to have a diabetic attack if you don't feed her. But at the time, it's like, you need to be a bit less chilled. It's not about you. I'm pleased if you're having a great time, but I'm not having a great time, and that needs to come through. But I think that there is, within the Australian character, if we can get that sense of that there's a smart way to serve people. And I think the same in Britain. Britain, shall we say, is also a country that doesn't have a reputation for great service. But I think it's, again, getting people to understand what service, getting staff to understand how that looks from the customer, but also getting customers to understand that there's a style to that. And one of the things I've explained to Australians here on that kind of other side of it, when they say British people aren't friendly, I said, no, what you have to remember, I put it as a population density per piece of land. I said, if you live in a big country with very few people, being really kind of out there and come here, we're glad to see you, is important. I said, if you live in a tiny country with very high population density, the most respectful thing you can do is leave people alone, because that's the most precious commodity you have. And I think if we can manage and promote that idea of, when a British person kind of is reserved with you, that it's because they're leaving, that they think they're doing the right thing by you. It's
interesting. My mum always says on that, she always says that with the English, she always found that with the English, they'll not necessarily strike up the conversation first with you, but if you open the conversation with them, super friendly, they'll talk all day, but they would never instigate it. She would just say that, generally speaking, which I kind of get. In Ireland, everybody would instigate it and everything else, but again, much lower density population. Very interesting though, that I never thought about that, but that actually makes complete sense. I'm just trying to think of other countries which are similarly densely populated, probably like Japan, where the culture is very much always considering others' needs first, actually.
Yes, and it's not that people aren't, you're not welcome or anything like that. It's just that, that very British phrase, minding your own business.
It's true. It's true. I love that. Carolyn, we are fast approaching out of time. The time has just whizzed along this evening. Where are we up to? It's evening for you guys. What time is it there, Carolyn?
It's 7 minutes past 9.
Gosh, have you had your tea already?
No, far too early.
Far too early. My gosh.
I'm
in bed at that time usually.
No, I have eaten my tea before now, but because today has run a bit late, I'm cool with that. And in the week up to Christmas, there's no way there is food in the fridge.
Yeah, fair play. Are you all set for Christmas? Have you got everything? Are you all organized?
Oh no, I'm about to do the annual ritual of, you see Christmas dinner in Sydney, there are many people who do the full English turkey. We don't, we do fish.
Yeah, nice.
So I'm trying to work out what is the best time of day to go to the fish markets in Sydney, which if people haven't been, the fish markets will be open for 36 hours straight.
Wow.
Until about 4 p.m. on Christmas Eve.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to work out when in that, particularly in the Omicron era, is going to be the right time of day to go and get my fish. So I've still got to get the fish. The pud's made. The starters are the half's in charge of the starters. Are you ready, Jen?
Yeah, pretty much. We're all set. We've got to we're making some sort of spicy nut treat things, which we're going to be doing this afternoon. But other than that, we're all pretty much all set for it. Which is actually we're organised in record time. Actually, even prepared all the veg already done.
Well, wind and weather permitting, I'm hoping to row under the harbour bridge on Christmas Day, which is the one day of the year we're allowed to take a rowing boat. I've kayaked under there, but it's the one day of the year allowed to take a rowing boat under there.
Oh, really?
Yeah, well, there's not much, it's quite a big space, but where you need to be in a rowboat and where you need to be in a ferry that can't actually see you.
Yeah.
So we basically row up, we row under it, we race back. And the point where we start the race is where the first ferry from Circular Quay on Christmas Day sounds its horn. Yeah. So we basically skedaddle out of the way. So I'm very much hoping that we'll get to do that again this year. So keep an eye out on the Facebook posts and the LinkedIn posts, Jed, because it will be there. But yeah, we felt very unprepared because we had our long lockdown finished in late October. So everything is kind of like, time is different here. Time is different. So what didn't we talk about that we said we'd talk about in this nice meandering conversation, and hoping a few people are still around for the rest of the journey?
It was just to sort of, I suppose, have a little bit of a review of the year, which is, pretty much what we've done. I think it was just to hopefully just give people a bit of an understanding as to some insights as to what's been going on this year, what's going on in the business of travel and tourism, and I think we've done that, or I think you've done that very, very well and very effectively.
Did I let you get a word in edgeways?
Yeah, I got in the odd word. Yeah.
Well, I suppose the one thing I thought when I was thinking about today, Jed, was I think about where we were when we caught up kind of last Christmas, and I was thinking about we're almost in the COVID, if we put this into, as British people want to do, into World War II terms, we're kind of in 1943, I feel like. That stage where everyone was thoroughly over it. but we weren't quite there yet. So we just got to hang in there and keep going.
It's the last push.
Hopefully. Well, WHO has announced that 2022 will be the year we end the pandemic. And, you know, aside from our shout out to the members of the public, obviously our healthcare workers, the people who turned up and gave the jabs and did the tests, and all of those people as well. And also the scientists who raced to create the vaccines, you know. So we've got a pathway through. We've got an evidence base on what works and what doesn't. You know, we've got to, you know, I remember during the first lockdown, somebody said, you know, your grandparents had to fight through the Blitz. You've just got to sit on the sofa, get over it. So, you know, we've just got to kind of keep that thing. So I feel if we look at 2022, I actually think 2021 was harder than 2020. We had more depths in 2020, I think, but 2021, it's a demonstration of why a war of attrition is called a war of attrition. And that felt like 2020 was crisis. This felt like attrition. And I think we're all tired, but you know, everything passes. Yeah. So,
as they say, was it the Churchill saying, when you're going through hell, keep going?
Yes, yes.
And it's true.
Well, I think much of this year, I wouldn't say it was well, it was maybe like the first circle of hell for fans of Dante. I can't remember. I think the first circle of hell was icy, but I think it was pretty glacially slow. So I think it's probably a bit more like purgatory than hell. Yeah. And the whole point of purgatory, apologies for those people who didn't grow up in a Catholic education and have no idea what the hell purgatory is this kind of waiting room till you get to the good places. I kind of feel like that's where 2021 was. Now we have to start turning 2022 into heaven. So yeah,
that's a great analogy. I absolutely love that. Let's it'll be interesting to see when we have this chat again. I mean, hopefully we'll speak a few times next year as well, but when we have this chat again at this time next year, it'll be interesting to see what we're reflecting back on. Hopefully it'll be all fun and sunshine from the past year when we look at 2022. But let's just see. But Carolyn, listen, thank you so much for your time and being so generous with your time as well. And coming straight in from the rowing as well. You're so dedicated, bless you.
Oh, I wouldn't say that. I would say, I think my rowing buddies would say different, but probably a bit more. I'm probably not going to watch. I probably listen to this with the video off.
Oh, it's been great. We've had our Christmas hats on. We look very festive. I look like I'm in a cabin.
Yeah, I've got my Christmas earrings.
You've got your Christmas earrings. Very good. I hadn't noticed them before, but it was because you've got the black background. I didn't see them.
Yeah,
very nice. So, lovely. Yeah. Very Christmassy. So, very festive.
Quick shout out to the local Marrickville lady who makes those.
Yeah, send us the link and we'll stick the link in the bio as well. Yeah.
Oh, I have to find it now, but I will do so. She makes glitter earrings, so
cool. Love it.
Okay, well, I will leave you and wish you and the family and everyone in UK tourism very, very, and indeed all your listeners around the world, because I know Low Season Traveller is a global enterprise these days. So whether or not you celebrate Christmas, it is a time of peace and goodwill to all men. So peace and goodwill to everyone, wisdom to our policymakers, and a good dose of resilience and a bit of good luck to the rest of us.
Absolutely, can't argue with that. Carolyn, okay. Thanks a million. Have a great Christmas.
And you. Bye.
Bye-bye. So there you have it. Huge thanks again to Carolyn for her brilliant insights and analysis as always. Please do feel free to reach out to Carolyn directly on LinkedIn or indeed by visiting the MyTravelResearch.com website. As we mentioned in this episode, we're currently planning a number of low-season small group tours for 2022, including Chiang Mai, Vietnam, Switzerland, Ireland, Cambodia, India, Sri Lanka, and more besides. They will all be wonderful, culturally immersive experiences in small groups where we'll really get under the skin of the destination in each case as we create our very own responsible, sustainable, guilt-free travel experiences. Keep an eye on our Facebook, LinkedIn, and homepage for more info coming very soon. And let us know if you're interested in becoming a low-season pioneer with us. But that's our show for this week. Thanks as always for your company. Have a great week wherever you are. Stay healthy, stay safe, keep your travel dreams alive, and don't forget to share this podcast, please, with your friends, family, and social networks. Finally, remember that travel is always better and fairer for the planet, the local communities, and you, the travelers, when it's without the crowds.